The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, I'm Carl Seidel, host of The People's View, sponsored by the Nashua City Republican Committee. And if you want, we meet at the Crown Plaza the second Thursday of every month. And if you want to find out more information, you can go to our website at nashuagop.org.
Welcome to The People's View.
Hello, and help me welcome Jim Rubens, who's running for Senate here in District 2.
It is a delight to be here. Delight to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you again. And how's things going? I mean, now you've been running for several months now.
3 months I've been at it. And I'm running because I'm providing an option for voters. Basically, Maggie Hassan and Kelly Ayotte are amazingly identical on all the major issues. You got one Democrat, one Republican. They got millions of dollars of lobbyist money from Washington, and they believe in about the same thing. So I'm providing an alternative for Republicans who want a Republican who, in the U.S. Senate, will vote like a Republican, will vote unlike Kelly Ayotte for fiscal responsibility. She went ahead, promised to be a fiscally responsible, fiscal conservative, and got down there to Washington, drank the lobbyist Kool-Aid, and voted in the last 2 years for the omnibus and omnibus budget bills. $1.5 trillion of additional debt. That's not fiscal conservatism. That's driving the country into bankruptcy. She promised to be for borders and to vote against amnesty. She gets down there, drinks the lobbyist Kool-Aid. This is Kelly Ayotte again. And she votes for the Gang of Eight, open borders, amnesty, and this is the third part of that bill that's not widely publicized, drive down American wages bill. That bill would flood the country, tripling legal immigration, amnesty to all the illegals, tripling H-1B visas, and the net effect of this is to make the borders insecure, to give amnesty to lawbreakers, and drive down American wages. And that bill, what does that do? These open borders, they're sneaking drug mules, they're sneaking backpacks filled with fentanyl and heroin across the border. Okay? What else is in those backpacks? There could be bomb-making material. We have an open, wide open border, and it's those drugs coming across here have killed at least 200 New Hampshire citizens last year. She promised to be a constitutional. This is Kelly Ayotte again. She promised to be a constitutional conservative and went ahead and endorsed President Obama's EPA global warming regulation, which would bury the states in 600 some odd pages of regulations. Do nothing about global warming for folks like myself who think it's a problem. Do nothing about it except bury the states in bureaucracy. She voted for the housing and urban development to take over local zoning. If HUD doesn't like the way your town's demography looks, they can withhold your taxpayer money from that town to force you to change your demographics and change your zoning. Kelly Ayotte voted for this. She voted for this thing called Every Student Succeeds Act last year, which, again, for the first time in U.S. history, unconstitutionally, I might add, requires states to bring their education plans to the U.S. Department of Education for up or down approval. This is, again, it's unconstitutional, and the federal government doesn't know how to run local education. And we're an individualized country. The Constitution reserves, under the 10th Amendment, powers not granted to the federal government, to the states, or the people, respectively. So I differ so fundamentally with this incumbent, Kelly Ayotte, too much like Maggie Hassan, no choice for voters. I'm providing choice.
So people listening are happy to hear these facts, or?
People are surprised because we don't have much of a media left in the state. And Kelly Ayotte, of course, is not proclaiming her votes to bankrupt the country for omnibus and omnibus.
No.
She's not proclaiming her vote, breaking her big promise not to do amnesty and to vote for the Gang of Eight open borders bill. She's not publicizing her anti-constitutional votes to have the feds take over education in our state and zoning in our state. And so people are very surprised when I talk about this stuff, and it causes people to want this choice.
You think people are more liable to listen this time because you ran once before and didn't make it, obviously?
Yeah,
but
yeah, I have wider name ID. The other advantage I have compared to last time is Bob Smith and I ran against the establishment's pick, Scott Brown. They brought him into the state. We had 10 U.S. Senate seats that were up at play in 2014. Give us the Senate, we'll change things. We'll become Republicans. out of those 10, Scott Brown was the only one to lose. So the same thing, that establishment in Washington has put the millions of bucks behind Kelly Ayotte, and they're misreading our state.
Yeah.
We're not so liberal that we have to have Republicans that vote with Democrats every time. We're not that liberal. We're a very liberty-oriented state. We've got a lot of libertarians here. We have landslides. On the Democratic side, we had Bernie Sanders win by a landslide. We had Donald Trump win by a landslide in our primary. Our people here in New Hampshire want to dethrone the establishment. They want Washington, and I'll come back to my slogan, they want Washington to work for Americans again. And that means we've got to break with the lobbyists in Washington who want wages lower in our country. They want the borders open. They don't mind if our country goes bankrupt, just as long as they're getting their pork this year. And the voters of this state want Washington to start paying attention to the middle class again, which means we've got to break with these lobbyists and these lousy trade deals that drive down wages. Okay? We've got to break with Kelly Ayotte's move to double and triple H-1B visas, where, and you might have seen these news stories, where Intel, Kodak, even Eversource in Connecticut, they're replacing good-paying, $100,000 plus American jobs with H-1B visa foreigners, and people are being forced to train their H-1B visa replacements, otherwise they don't get their severance pay. It's very, very awful. And Kelly Ayotte is voting, again, to triple this kind of H-1B visa abuse. And when people learn about this, they see we need a U.S. Senator who's on the side of the middle class, not on the side of the lobbyists in Washington, who, again, they're hell-bent on driving down wages in this country. And the middle class is under a lot of pressure.
So do you see this, Trump's leading that charge in a way?
On a pro-American economic policy, pro-American worker economic policy. No amnesty for illegals, no radical increases in legal immigration that'll drive down wages, no lousy trade deals that bleed. We're bleeding $500 billion a year in these trade deals, and with that hemorrhage of money, we're losing jobs and wages are going down. So again, I know that the lobbyists in Washington who fund Kelly Ayotte, and Maggie Hassan, by the way, want this kind of policy. It's why people are pissed off in our state and around the country. It's why people need, and the president can't do this alone. Okay? You're going to need a U.S. Senate with sufficient votes, because we don't elect kings. The power is divided, and Congress has the power of the purse. Congress has the power to make and repeal laws. So it's important for voters to understand, I'm giving the voters of New Hampshire this choice, a choice for someone who's on the side of the middle class in New Hampshire, who wants limited government, constitutionally limited government, who wants budgets not to bankrupt us.
Well, tell me and tell the audience how your experience has helped you in this direction. What have you done in lawmaking that would show that you could do it again?
I go back to the start of my life. I got up to New Hampshire because I went to Dartmouth College. I was a chemistry major, and I had pretty much finished my major late in my junior year, and my parents got divorced, and all of a sudden the money was gone. And I left college, and it was during one of these Arab oil embargoes, and there were bumper stickers on the back of cars that said, "We're the last Yankee to leave New England. Please turn out the lights." I could not get a job doing anything at all. And so I became a dump picker. I went into the dump back when they were dumps, and I started picking copper. I was black and dirty every day. My hands were black, copper and brass, and I brought it over to a junk dealer, and I sold it, and I was able to earn about $40 an hour, which was really good at the time.
That's not bad.
And very
back
good.
Then,
And so I was able to start investing. I bought my first apartment house, a 4-family apartment house. I added some units. I started investing more. I started businesses. I started and ran 10 businesses. I was a serial entrepreneur, and I retired after I had made enough money to make myself comfortable and to retire, and I decided to run for state senate here. I'd never held office before, but I've always loved public policy, loved doing the people's work, and so I interviewed the Senate president, who was a Republican, the second most powerful person in the state, and after a 2-hour interview with 3 other people who were political activists in the Upper Valley, I decided that I could do a better job than this fellow. He didn't know what he was doing. So I ran for that office, and I won. And I campaigned on some big, bold Republican issues. I campaigned on what today is called Senate Bill 2 voting, so that people can vote in the privacy of a voting booth on their town and school district budgets. I got that passed my first year in office. and I campaigned on school choice, specifically charter schools, which was quite a new idea, and I had to explain it to people in a fairly liberal district that I ran in, and people liked these ideas. Core Republican ideas, more voting rights, more freedom, freedom of choice in schools, and I got the charter school law passed my second year in office. And I'm proud to say that right here in Nashua, the state's top testing school is a charter school, the Academy of Science
Very
and
good.
Design. And one of the ways that it helps people, it's kids who love science, math, engineering, physics. They can get a full dose of this kind of learning. It helps us, America, become more competitive. It draws young families into our state, which we need. We need young people coming in. And it operates at about a third the cost per student of the average K-12 school. So it's helping taxpayers.
Right.
Parents are getting choice. We're giving better education for kids who want that approach. And it's saving taxpayers money. So this is where I'm coming from on solving the country's problems now. We got some humongous problems. Our country, our economy's dead in the water. The middle class is being squeezed hard. The borders are open. We got ISIS in 8 countries now due to Hillary Clinton and Kelly Ayat's policies of funding and training ISIS in Syria and Iraq, and in intervening in Libya, where Hillary Clinton and Kelly Ayat beating the drum to take out the dictator there, and now we got ISIS in Libya. These policies are not working for Americans. So we need to bring some big, bold, Republican, imaginative ideas to fix our budget deficit. We're $1 trillion a year underwater right now, looking out over the next 10 years. It means that we've got to do some serious soul searching. All of the pork has got to go. The log rolling has all got to go.
Yeah.
All the stuff the lobbyists want that are driving us into economic stagnation and keeping interest rates at zero so that no one can get interest on their savings anymore. All of these policies have got to be changed, and it requires U.S. senators to take the side of the American people and not the lobbyists who run these
And that would be your prime aim once you get into the Senate?
We got 4 big things we got to do in Washington. We've got to balance the budget so that the economy can recover normally. Otherwise, our country is going to go. Our balance sheet in the U.S., our debt to GDP ratio, where Greece was in 2008.
Yeah.
In Greece, the middle class is dumpster diving for food now. Okay, we have got to deal with the spending and debt addiction in Washington before we get to that point. We have time, but we cannot wait another 6 years.
No.
We've got to deal with our economic problems. We got the middle class squeezed. Wages are down, cost of living up. We've got to have policies that bring the jobs back. We've got to stop exporting jobs. It requires a break with the lobbyists who buy politicians, including Kelly Ayotte, okay? Why would she vote for tripling H-1B visas when we know they're being abused to drive down wages for Americans? Why would anyone do this? We've got to have U.S. senators taking the side. We've got to have policies that restore limited government, constitutionally limited government. I propose that we get rid of the Department of Education. Block grant that money, that is our money anyway. Block grant it back to the states and the school districts so that each state and school district can customize education according to the needs of what the state and local people want. The federal government doesn't know how to fix schools. We've watched them do this for 30 years. Have schools gotten better because of federal involvement?
No, every
They've
4 to
increased
6
the
years it's a
strings.
new program.
There's a new, every 10 years. Back when I was chair of the Education Committee in the State Senate, it was Goals 2000 at the time, and then it became No Child Left Behind, and then it became Common Core, and now it's Every Student Succeeds, okay? All of it, and Kelly Ayotte supports this stuff. She voted for it, but it doesn't work. So we need to restore constitutionally limited government, and that's a core Republican value. So again, I'm providing a choice for Republicans so that we have a Republican in the U.S. Senate who will vote for our core values, for fiscal responsibility, for limited government, for freedom, for liberty, for individuals.
You mentioned the Department of Education. Is there any other departments that you'd get rid of? I mean, a smaller government is an objective, I guess.
Well, you think of the Department of Commerce. Is the Department of Commerce enhancing prosperity in the U.S.? And if we have to look, what can we do to enhance prosperity in the United States of America? 2 huge things we've got to do. We've got, I mean, if you look at the Federal Reserve Board and the government, they've been in this wildly, insanely experimental program of massive budget deficits for the last 7 years and 0 interest rates, okay? What has that done? Has it stimulated the private economy? No. It has frozen investment in productive assets. It's taken away interest on people's savings so that when you save money, and it's caused investors to retreat and create bubbles in bonds worldwide. There we have bonds in bubbles, in stocks, and in commercial real estate now. So instead of causing investment in job-creating activity, it's formed bubbles. So to turn the economy around, we've got to have a Washington that is fiscally sober. They've got to cut the debt addiction. They've got to spend no more than we've got. It requires the pork all throughout the budget to go, including the defense budget. The F-35 bomber, Kelly Ayotte, down there in Washington, voted for $10.5 billion to fund the F-35. And there are lobbyists in the hall working very hard. The F-35 was, it had 17 dogfights with a 30-year-old F-16, which is one of our fighter aircraft. And the F-35, which is a $1.25 trillion long-term program, it lost every one of the 17 dogfights. The pilots of the F-35 have a $6,000 custom-fitted helmet that does not work for any other pilot. Every time the F-35 takes off, you have to rewrite software code for the individual fight that it's going to go into. It can't take off when the temperature is too hot. To even do well at dogfights, the fuel tank only has to be half full. Okay, this is a failed, the failed defense pork. It has one purpose: to spread pork around so that defense contractors can give campaign money to politicians to be in Washington. And when politicians like Kelly Ayotte vote for the $10.5 billion, which he did about a month ago for this program, that's taking money away from readiness, training, and supplies for our military. It's making us weaker militarily, okay? So I'm illustrating the mindset to balance the budget, to keep us strong militarily. We're going to have to break with the lobbyists who buy these politicians. We're going to have to break with the pork, and we're going to have to allow interest rates to go back to normal so that people can see that we have a stable monetary and fiscal policy in the United States. It's going to take some real backbone, some imagination, and some persuasive ability. That's how I got the SB 2 passed into law. It's how I got charter schools passed into law. You got to talk with everyone. You got to persuade people that the well-being of America is better than satisfying our lobbyists. And it's doable. Americans are ready for this. I really think so.
And this is, you're getting good feedback from the people you go around to.
People want to hear this message. They want to have politicians representing who are not bought and paid for. It's essential. If we're going to turn this country around, if we're going to deal with these problems, you've got to have people that are on the side of Americans, not bought and paid for by lobbyists who fund campaigns.
What are some of the questions you're getting back from the audience that you talk to?
People are really interested in these subjects.
They're really, I think you said earlier that they're really surprised because they haven't heard this. The media has not
there's no media anymore, and they cover, if you get Kelly Ayotte, Maggie Hassan, they do photo ops, and so the media will show up to a photo op, the camera will roll, a bunch of people smiling, but there's no coverage, there's no investigative reporting, very little. Very little coverage of issues, very little coverage of voting patterns in committee when these deals are hatched. And it's up to candidates. It's up to me to provide this choice.
Yeah, you provide that, but if somebody wants to check to see what you say is the same thing, because where do they go? Where do they validate what you're telling them?
All of this information is available on the internet if you want to do your research. There are objective think tanks and organizations that follow this stuff in great deal. That's one of the benefits of the internet. But you got to do your own research. If you just look at the nightly news, you're not going to get any of this stuff. And you can go to my website where I'm making a lot of claims in this. You see me making a lot of claims. You can go to my website, jimrubens.com, and I have primary source hyperlinks to objective sources.
I see. Okay, that's what I was getting.
When I say that Kelly Ayotte was drumbeating and cheerleading for Hillary Clinton's failed nation-building war in Libya and in Syria, Iraq, you can go directly to prime source corroboration of these claims. This is hard for people to believe. Why would Kelly Ayotte be on the same side as Hillary Clinton? On this policy that has made America less safe, that has spread ISIS into 8 countries. It sounds crazy. People go, how in heck could that be true? You go to my website, jimrubens.com, under issues, and you'll see the documentation. Will the media cover this? No, of course not.
No, but there's at least some place that people can go who are
Yes,
listening to
absolutely,
you today
absolutely.
that can verify some of this and even get into more detail,
Great deal of
which
detail.
is,
One of my,
I'm sure that there's other things that we're not covering yet that are still in that on that website.
one of my strengths that I keep in a box during speeches, because you got 3 minutes or 10 minutes to
Yeah,
talk,
all right.
is I'm deep into policy wonkery. I study things very, very hard before I say things and before I fashion policy solutions to problems. I'm very big on solutions, very big on, I'm an entrepreneur. I've started and run 10 companies. I invest in startup companies and technology, so I'm really big on research, really big on new ideas, and because the country's problems, I mean, this country is being driven off a cliff in 3 ways. You've seen Thelma and Louise driving the car off a cliff in one way. We're driving off a cliff in 3 or 4 ways, and it's going to require some immense imagination, persuasive ability, enthusiasm, and the candidates that we elect to the U.S. Senate have got to be untethered from the lobbyists,
Right.
have got to be free to act in the U.S. national interest. Otherwise, we're going to get more of this stuff. If you vote for Kellyanne, the establishment saying, we'll put Kellyanne back in office because an R is better than a D, even though she votes like a D, it's not enough. It's not enough to turn the country around.
Well, how do you cut off this flow of money, which controls a lot?
Not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So, the lobbyists are going to keep buying politicians. That's a given. But fortunately, I'm in a small state. I've got my own money. I was able to raise, $2.5 million last time in my campaign. And, I can make the case, and because we're a small state, I can meet a lot of people face to face.
Much easier.
And I can talk about this stuff. I don't have to, have an airplane to get from city to city. I can drive there. So I'm finding that people are.
Well, that's fine for New Hampshire, but how do we get another?
That's another problem.
Yeah.
Which is why on my website you'll see a solution to bought and paid for politics.
Oh, really?
I'm proposing, and this is a different solution than you usually hear from Republicans, but I'm finding the conservatives greatly agree now that the system is deeply corrupt, that it's a crony capitalist system in Washington. It's why the tax rates are so high and the tax code is so blasted complicated. It's why Kellyanne voted in the omnibus bill last year to bring back tens of thousands of tax breaks for lobbyists who want special breaks. So conservatives have seen that the regulatory apparatus, conservatives are constantly talking about fixed regulations. Did we ever do it? Have conservatives, my entire adult life, Republicans have been telling me they're going to fix the tax code. They're going to fix regulations. Okay? The tax code is more complicated. The regulations are more than they were before. Republicans won't do it because I'm afraid to say that they're paid by their campaign contributors to keep it complex and to keep the regulatory system complex, because it's easier for big business to suppress competition.
Yeah.
Okay? So conservatives have reached the conclusion that it is a crony capitalist bought and paid for system. So I'm proposing giving all voters $100 of their taxes back in the form of a tax rebate every 2 years. You get your $100 back, and it's like a voucher. And you can spend that on any candidate for office who is willing to voluntarily foreclose themselves of big dollar lobbyist money in Washington and become dependent on the people alone and listen to the people, and there would be sufficient sums of money for candidates, even for myself can be self-funded, I'm wealthy enough to do that, but for candidates who are not, it gives those candidates the ability to go out and raise sufficient sums of money to be competitive from regular, ordinary Americans. And what that would do, it would empower regular Americans again. So
That's an interesting
it's on my website.
proposal.
Yeah,
I don't know if I heard that one from you before, but
it's been floating around for about 30 years. I've fashioned it in a way that I think works, that conservatives can see.
Because you have to combat the flow of money.
Right.
I mean, you can't cut it off.
Well, I'm not in favor of restricting the First Amendment. See, I break from liberals.
I agree.
On
That's
this.
part of.
Personally, I don't like super PACs. I'd prefer the big donors to give money directly to the candidate in any amount that the big donor wants to give, and then disclose it on the internet real time. So you know if George Soros wants to buy a candidate, he can do so.
As long as he sells
It's
everybody,
voluntarily foreclosed, instead of George Soros giving to a super PAC, which has these these wink and nod relationships. We're supposed to not talk to each other, super PACs and candidates. Now it's just all out in the open. But that has to be combined with a method to empower small donors so that candidates are not just dependent on people who can write $1 million checks or write $1 million check themselves. Okay, that's not sufficient.
Well, your comments are very interesting, and I want to change the subject, though, just because we're running out of time. We talked a little bit about the granite hammer here and the opium problem in New Hampshire, but if you're a senator, you're going to have to address that for this country.
Yes.
What would you do? What would you push?
We've got to recognize, and this is also on my website, jimrubens.com, we need to end the failed drug war. It's not working. I had the opportunity to visit the Cheshire County Jail, interview the prisoners there, and I asked a group of prisoners, and it's on my website. This interview blew my mind when I first heard it. But the commissioner of the jail allowed me to go and interview and videotape it. And I asked the prisoners, they were all women on this side, and asked them, why are you in here? They're all there because of opioid addiction and the crimes related to getting money for their addiction. How many of you have been in jail before for this problem? All but 2 hands go up. What are you going to do when you get out? To the person, they said, I'm going to have a needle back in my arm within minutes when I get off the grounds of the jail, okay? The drug war, we've spent $1 trillion on it in the United States since the early 1970s. It's a rank failure. You can get heroin inside the Valley Street Jail in Manchester easier than you can on the streets of Manchester, okay? The prisoners told me they're trading sex for heroin inside the prison, okay? It's not working. So I'm proposing we end prohibition incarceration because it doesn't work and it wastes a lot of money, and provide treatment on demand. When an addict, and these addicts, and I talk to them, what do you want your life to be? I want to be back with my kids. I want to have a job. I want to make a living. I want to get this beast out of my mind. When people get addicted to opioids, it takes over the brain. It rewires your brain. You need treatment on demand. Can't be 2 days later. It's got to be right then and there whenever the addict is ready. When the addict says, I want to turn my life around, it's got to be right there. And it's got to be funded. So I'm proposing under the 10th Amendment, the federal government remove the prohibition on marijuana. Let the states tax, regulate marijuana as they see fit. 4 states have already legalized. 24 states have legal medical marijuana. They're all breaking federal law. Get rid of that law. Let the states, and the states, should they wish, and I'm not compelling this because I'm a 10th Amendment guy, should the states wish, under this new freedom, they can take the significant sums of money that would come from marijuana taxation and properly fund addiction treatment so that there is treatment on demand. New Hampshire is so far behind the curve on treatment on demand. We're not even close. This granite hammer thing you're going to vote on, it's a tiny fraction of the sum of money needed. And you can see in Switzerland, they have a program somewhat like this, treatment on demand. They have a rate of opioid overdose deaths 1/20 the rate we have in New Hampshire. So it begs policymakers, what are they doing in Switzerland that's different than what we're doing in America? They've stopped the drug war, and they've gone to treatment on demand. They've taken the savings in crime. You dry up demand for drugs. When you take an addict and you turn that addict into a person with a normal life, you dry up demand. And so you're cutting crime, you're cutting AIDS transmission, you're cutting Hep C transmission, you're cutting ancillary crimes related to the obtaining of money to buy drugs, and you're cutting incarceration, and the savings are huge. And those savings, only about $25 of the dollars spent on incarceration prohibition are necessary to fully fund nationwide treatment on demand. So again, imagination, new ideas, fix problems. We got to break through, and Kelly Ayotte is behind more of this drug war, okay? It doesn't work. So again, voters, look at the candidates. I'm given a choice. I'm giving voters a choice in this state for a candidate. I've got imagination. I'm willing to vote like a Republican in the US Senate. I'm for small government. I'm for limited government. And I'm for freedom. I'm for balanced budgets. I'm for sealing the borders and making us safe. There's a choice.
Jim, thank you very much
Thank
for
you,
being
Carl.
on the show today.
Carl.
And good luck.
Yeah.
And the rest of you can find out more about the Nashua Republican City Committee by going to NashuaGOP.org and your website. Thank you.